A costa leste da ilha Vancouver. Uma incrível via marítima protegida. Do Estreito de Geórgia à passagem Discovery. Fósseis antigos revelam uma vida pré-histórica.
Paleontologists began to realize what a treasure trove we have here.
O habitat do urso negro em risco e as pessoas que lutam para salvá-los.
Always a direct link between a human action and why the bears are with us.
E uma das maiores explosões provocadas pelo homem.
It took 70 feet off the North Pinnacle.
Vamos explorar a costa como nunca e desvendar os segredos do passado, presente e futuro marítimos. Este é o Canadá visto de cima. Na costa leste da ilha Vancouver, o farol da ilha Entrance marca a entrada do porto de Nanaimo. Nanaimo é o lar de mais de 80 mil habitantes. Ela fica ao norte de Victoria, capital da Colômbia Britânica, e a oeste de Vancouver, na outra margem do Estreito de Geórgia. A cidade é a base para os transportes da região. Balsas que partem da Baía Departure ligam a ilha Vancouver à cidade de Vancouver. No céu, ultraleves sobrevoam a agitada via marítima. No mar, ilhas acidentadas margeiam a costa. Esta é a massa de água conhecida como Estreito de Geórgia. É uma área espetacular, com 240 quilômetros de extensão que separam a ilha Vancouver do continente. A 25 quilômetros ao norte dali, fica a cidade de Parksville. É um dos principais destinos para o turismo e para as atividades marítimas de lazer. Perto dali, em Arrington, uma operação essencial está em andamento. O Centro de Recuperação de North Island se dedica à reabilitação de animais selvagens da ilha. Uma iniciativa ousada numa região onde o desenvolvimento humano continua invadindo o território das aves e dos ursos negros.
Today you're at the North Island Wildlife Recovery Centre, just on the east side of Vancouver Island, and we're just approximately about 10 minutes from Parksville. It's a beautiful village called Arrington. Here we do wildlife rehabilitation and education of the public about wildlife issues. So our mandate really is to care for ill, injured, and orphaned wildlife. When we first started here, there absolutely was nothing on this piece of land except a few little buildings. And so the vision was to create a world-class wildlife rehabilitation center and to deal with mostly bears and raptors. And I think we've achieved that.
So the raptor program, we deal with the native, the bald eagles, sometimes golden eagles, variety of species of owls, hawks, falcons. So a lot of times they're injured on roadways. We see wing injuries, starving animals or animals that lost their habitat. So they're brought to us and raised over a number of months depending on the injuries that they have. We're really known for our bald eagle flight enclosure as well, that is one of the largest in North America. So some of the smaller rehab centers actually will send bald eagles to us kind of as a graduation pen where they can really fly and build up their flight muscles, and we can watch them before releasing them back into the wild. We also have our resident black bear, Canute, who's 16 years old and has lived at the center for his entire life. He was raised here and really helped teaching us what bears need in food and in space and in their hibernation needs, so he was a key role in building the rehab program. Now we're going to go into our black bear rehabilitation center. So we've got 3 cubs that are between about 7 and 8 months old in there right now that all came to us earlier this summer. So we're going to go in and just see what they're doing at the moment. They're in their outdoor browse area where they've got free-flowing water and vegetation, and we hide food for them. So the 3 of them, it's 2 twins and 1 single, but they've all become good friends, and at this time of the year they're very social when they're cubs, so it's been great for us to have multiples because they teach each other bear things. So we don't talk much when we're in with the cubs, and they'll want to move away from us, but we can see what they're doing. Well, I'll let you 2 go in, and then we got to close up the doors and lock them up behind us so that nobody escapes. So this is the area that's all monitored by closed surveillance TVs. We're generally not in with the bears, and you'll hear the nature sounds that are piped in here to mask any sound that the bears might hear of people or the public or exterior sounds. Get them used to natural sounds. They've just run through the sliding door there to where they've got a couple of big water tubs and some hanging toys. Here, there's one. Check you out. That's Buster. That was our first admittance this spring. Just found alone, wandering by himself with no sign of mom. That looks like one of the twins that we have that we got in July, whose mom was hit and killed on the island highway. So they were all trapped by conservation officers. So the 3 cubs that we have now will spend almost another year here with us. They're growing really well and we're monitoring their health. We're going to have our veterinarian come in shortly and we'll ear tag them so we can identify each one of them and check their health status with blood and hair samples. Then they'll spend the winter with us, and we do have a dark room that we can put infrared cameras on so they have a chance to hibernate if the weather sort of pushes them that way. And then they'll pack on a bunch of weight next spring, and about this time next year they should all be released back out into the wild. It's sort of a dream come true to work here. You never know what's going to come through the door, what type of animal, and to see, especially the ones that we raise from babies, to see them get another chance, or those ones that have been impacted by humans. It's nice to be able to sort of rectify that and give them another chance to be wild again. So it's a really enjoyable and really sort of satisfying job to have.
A noroeste de Nanaimo, os suaves contornos da costa da Colômbia Britânica levam à cidade de Qualicum Beach. E a regiões inabitadas cheias de belezas naturais. No mar, o farol da Ilha Crom tem 17 metros de altura. O farol começou as operações na noite de Ano Novo de 1891 e desde então vem guiando o caminho na via marítima mais importante da América do Norte. Construído na ponta de Bain Sound, o farol é a porta de entrada para as ilhas Hornby e Denman, que são as joias marítimas do Estreito de Geórgia. A ilha Denman tem 50 quilômetros quadrados de extensão e pode ser comparada a Manhattan em termos de tamanho e forma. No entanto, é pouco populosa. Ela é coberta por uma massa densa de abetos de Douglas. E ligada ao continente através de balsas que saem de Buckley Bay. Outra rota segue até a ilha Hornby. Hornby é uma ilha menor. E exibe uma linda paisagem árida. Sempre exposta ao mar aberto. É é o lar de pouco menos de 1.000 residentes fixos, mas a população quadruplica no verão. Mas sua principal característica são as praias de areia e cascalho. A região que vai de Qualicum Beach à Ilha Hornby já está ficando famosa como uma das principais áreas para a descoberta de fósseis.
Right now I'm standing on what is known as Qualicum Beach. Qualicum Beach is located about mid-island on the east coast of Vancouver Island. This is fossil collector's paradise. Geologists have been exploring Vancouver Island for more than 100 years, but the geologists in the past have been mainly interested in the economic resources, and the paleontology was virtually unexplored. As a result, when a group of amateur paleontology societies sprung up here on the island, amateurs were finding all kinds of incredible fossils. As a result of that, the professional paleontologists began to realize what a treasure trove we have here on the island. Hornby Island is famous for its ammonites, and there's a great variety. The ammonites that we find on Hornby Island are from what's called the Upper Cretaceous time. That's when the dinosaurs were just about to become extinct near the end of the Cretaceous, what's called the Cretaceous time. And the shelled animals called the ammonites also become extinct about the same time. I first learned about the fossils of Vancouver Island when I was at UBC studying paleontology. I started to build up a large collection of fossils from this area. After I accumulated quite a few thousand fossils, people started up a historical society museum here. Welcome to the Vancouver Island Paleontology Museum. This is a museum that's a collaboration between the Qualicum Beach Historical Society and the Vancouver Island Paleontology Museum. And we actually have fossils here from all over the world, but we do have an extensive fossils from Vancouver Island. For example, we've got, this is a fossil fish actually from British Columbia. It's a coelacanth, a fish that they thought was extinct for about 130 million years. Lots of heteromorphic ammonites from Hornby. It's one of the incredible locations where these types of fossils are found. We have a number of different displays. Here's some more of the Vancouver Island fossils. And then we have some of the younger fossils. These are Eocene fossils. They're only about 45 million years old.
Há décadas, Graham Beard vem descobrindo fósseis que ajudam a entender o passado. E o legado dele pode estar garantido para sempre graças à descoberta de uma nova espécie que muitos acreditam ser de um pterossauro dentado. A espécie recebeu o nome do cientista Guauinapterus beardi.
Pterosaurs are flying reptiles. This is the fossil that was named after me, Guauinapterus beardi. This is a cast of the fossil, and as you can see, it was found in a fairly small concretion, and the lady that actually found it just popped it, and out popped this part of the, that's actually part of the upper, what's called the mandible of the pterosaur. And as you can see, there's a row of teeth here. And this really was exciting because previous to this, people thought that the toothed pterosaurs had been extinct for about 20 million years. To me, fossil collecting is not just about beautiful objects, which they are, but they're also important scientific objects. And we can learn a great deal about past ecosystems and climates, all kinds of discovery, the evolution of various life forms. It's so exciting. You go out and you're walking along and you'll pop open a rock and there'll be something totally new to science. It's the thrill of discovery. It's just, and it goes on. You never know what you're going to find when you go out fossil collecting.
No continente, muitas das principais atrações da Ilha Vancouver ficam escondidas longe da costa. Este é o Parque Provincial de Macmillan, lar do famoso Cathedral Grove, que reúne abetos de Douglas com mais de 800 anos de idade. Alguns têm até 9 metros de diâmetro e são considerados maravilhas naturais do Canadá. Mas fora dos limites do parque, mesmo essas árvores estão em risco. Quase 3/4 das antigas florestas da Ilha Vancouver foram desmatados. A noroeste, o Lago Comox se estende por mais de 10 quilômetros. O lago ganhou o nome de uma cidade próxima, Comox, que na língua Kwakiutl significa riqueza ou abundância. O lago é sereno e faz parte de uma reserva ecológica que protege plantas singulares. E tem uma paisagem diferente e sombria. Mas muitas pessoas dizem que a melhor parte do Lago Comox é a proximidade com a majestosa geleira de Comox. Localizada a 30 quilômetros da costa, a geleira tem quase 2.000 metros de altitude e faz parte da cadeia de montanhas da ilha. A geleira de Comox também estabelece o limite sudeste do Parque Provincial de Strathcona. Uma maravilha natural com montanhas, vales e lagos glaciais. Mais ao norte, o pico do Monte Washington marca o horizonte. Nomeado em homenagem ao hidrógrafo John Washington, da Marinha Real Britânica, a montanha engloba uma das estações de esqui favoritas da região. Aqui, a precipitação da neve chega a 6 metros no inverno. Por causa da proximidade com a costa, o monte também é conhecido pela vista espetacular. Do topo, os visitantes têm uma visão clara de Powell River e de Sechelt, ambas cidades localizadas no continente. De volta à costa, as cidades de Courtenay e Comox marcam um retorno à civilização. Juntas, as cidades têm mais de 50.000 habitantes. Aqui fica o CFB Comox, o maior aeroporto militar da costa oeste do Canadá. Estabelecida durante a Segunda Guerra Mundial, a base hoje abriga aviões comuns e antissubmarinos, além da frota de aeronaves de resgate da costa oeste. "30 quilômetros a noroeste de Courtenay e Comox fica a cidade de Campbell River. Lar de pouco mais de 30.000 habitantes, ela é a última grande cidade ao norte da costa leste da ilha Vancouver. Além dela, há apenas florestas e pequenas comunidades. Um refúgio para os primeiros colonizadores, estas águas forneciam proteção e peixes em abundância. Campbell River é considerada a capital mundial do salmão. A cidade é cercada por algumas das ilhas mais serenas do mundo. A Ilha de Cortés tem apenas 1.000 habitantes. marco marítimo em meio às belas águas do Estreito de Geórgia. A oeste, vemos a Ilha de Quadra. Com 310 quilômetros quadrados, ela é a maior ilha desta via marítima. A ponta sul da ilha é uma região tradicional para os povos nativos. É uma costa mergulhada em história. Nestas praias, histórias e antigos mistérios foram preservados por milhares de anos. Rod Burns é um guia que trabalha com os povos nativos de Quadra.
Quadra Island is an amazing place. We're pretty close to 50 degrees north latitude, 125 west, and we're about 10-minute ferry ride from a wonderful city, Campbell River. We must give absolutely thousands of years respect to the First Nations people. Currently, the Weewakai Nation, part of the Kwakiutl, Kwakwaka'waka'waks, it's their territory. I am very, very honored they've allowed me in certain realms to speak on their behalf. And I say, Gaelic Hasla, welcome to Sakwalutin. Wow. Where I'm standing now at the tip of Quadra Island, Sakwalutin. Cape Mudge Reserve has been a native settlement for hundreds of years. Then Vancouver came here in the 1790s, Captain Vancouver and the Spanish explorers. We had a wonderful, amazing history of the gold rush coming up from California, so the 49ers, and then very critically, the green gold rush, the discovery of the value of timber. At the tip of Quadra Island, it's a mystery, an amazing mystery of petroglyphs, the rock images. There's a rock over here, it's about 2 meters in size, 1.5 meters high, and if you go close to it, you're going to find a collection of dimples and scratches that forms a face. Right in here, there's a dimple, and there's a dimple and a dimple and a dimple. They're distant between my 2 fingers, about this deep. But look at this, follow the finger, you should be able to see a shadow line. So maybe it's a hairline, okay? Look, here's some eyes. Nose, mouth, and so there's this whole face. Now, what is it? It's a representation of a human. Why is it? Below this point here, the tide would be salt water. Can you imagine somebody taking a rock and pounding and pounding and pounding to make this whole ridge line, to make the dimples? Why? Second petroglyph, this one over here, you start looking at it. Look for the shadows. And there's the faces here and coming along, your eyes and nose. The detail, it's not quite as deep as the other one, but here's some legs, here's some arms. Question again, it's here at the barnacle line. So somebody is standing now, again, up to their knees. They've got their song, their story of this person, or this image, this spirit, their brother, their sister. What would it be? What is it now? We're talking about where were we in the past, where are we going to in the future? We've got somebody who was dedicated carver, and they were be able to have the time, the patience, pounding and pounding and pounding, saying their prayers in honesty and respect to give this representation. Then came their brother, their sister, the storyteller, the story keeper, again, to pass on to now generations and future generations. It's really interesting because the petroglyphs have been here, we're not sure, but in excess of 3,000 years. People have come and gone. Towns, village sites have lasted maybe 100 years, maybe a couple hundred years. The stone, the land, the water is still here. What a connection between time, past, and future.
Situada entre as águas do Pacífico e o continente norte-americano, a Passagem Discovery é uma via marítima espetacular, com 25 quilômetros de extensão. Ela ganhou este nome por causa do Discovery, navio que o capitão Vancouver usou para chegar até aqui em 1792. Hoje, ela é essencial para o transporte marítimo, pois permite a chegada de mercadorias até pequenas comunidades e o envio de recursos naturais para os principais centros industriais no sul. É na passagem que se situam as Ilhas Discovery. São elas as Ilhas de Quadra, Chain, e Sonora, que marca o limite leste desta via marítima. Ela faz parte de uma via marítima maior, a Passagem Interior, uma das rotas de navegação mais famosas do mundo. São mais de 40 mil quilômetros de costa acidentada e protegida, que se estendem do Alasca até o estado americano de Washington. Apesar da Passagem Discovery ser apenas um trecho desta via marítima, ela teve um papel importante na manutenção dessa rota. Nem sempre foi seguro navegar por aqui. Um obstáculo submarino, conhecido como Ripper Rock, está situado em Seymour Narrows, a parte mais estreita da rota, e já bloqueou a passagem de navios. Foi necessário provocar uma das maiores explosões da história para tornar este caminho seguro para os marinheiros.
Seymour Narrows is the main waterway for vessels going by Campbell River on their way to Prince Rupert in Alaska. In Seymour Narrows, it's noted for the fast rising tides and the turbulent, gaping whirlpools. In Seymour Narrows, there is a mountain under the water with steep sides, irregular shaped, and it has two pinnacles. And that was the hazard in Seymour Narrows for these ships. From British Columbia's earliest days, the rock was wrecking vessels, and a lot of lives were lost. Pretty close to 50 ships were wrecked or sunk there, and about 100 lives. Some of the vessels that went down, everyone drowned. Some just got holes ripped in them, and as people escaped, some of them would get away with their life. There was pressure put on the Canadian government to try to get rid of this hazardous rock. It was first proposed in 1931, but nothing happened till about 1943 and 1945. They planned to drill into the top of the rock from a barge that was anchored directly over the two pinnacles. Now, this project cost about $1 million, and it was not successful. And at this time is when the crew boat got caught in a whirlpool and 9 lives were lost. Nothing happened until 1955. That's when the engineers in the federal government come up with another plan. So this plan was to go to nearby Maud Island and sink a shaft, and that would be about the height of a 50-story building. And then the tunnel was driven 7,000 feet, and then they went up into the two pinnacles. The drillers were experienced hard rock miners, and they took about 2.5 years to put 1,200 feet of tunnels in the rock pinnacles. Once they had those tunnels all drilled out, they put in 1,300 tons of special high explosive. In April 1958, everything was set up, and on the day to set off the explosion, they had a special underground bunker where the television crews and officials from our Canadian government were able to watch the explosion when it went off. And it happened at 9:30 in the morning, just when the tide was right. When that explosion was set off, it was the largest man-made, non-nuclear peacetime explosion. It blew about 2 acres of rock off those twin pinnacles. It took 70 feet off the north pinnacle and 45 off the southern pinnacle. This explosion that blew off those twin peaks was a success. Now the rock is not a hazard to the marine traffic. It's not going to tear the bottom out of the boat. So I think that mariners are quite pleased that that rock got moved.
Da cidade de Nanaimo, a ilha de Quadra, e as Ilhas Discovery. A costa leste da ilha Vancouver se estende por centenas de quilômetros, revelando uma beleza impressionante. É um refúgio para os homens do mar. Um paraíso para colonizadores. E o habitat de incríveis animais selvagens. Com petróglifos antigos, fósseis e florestas que nos fazem lembrar de um passado incrível. Esta costa continua a nos inspirar. Aqui, nos limites do Canadá.